My name is Rosemary Giuliano, and I have the pleasure of interviewing Carolyn Kelly on this 8th day of February 2005. I'm conducting this interview as part of the Connecticut Bar Foundation James W. Cooper Fellows Oral History of Connecticut Women in the Legal Profession project. This project is sponsored by the Connecticut Bar Foundation. Welcome, Carolyn.
Thank you.
Let's begin by telling us when and where you were born.
I was born in Clifton Springs, New York, October 27th, 1937.
Where's Clifton Springs, New York?
It's in upstate New York in the Finger Lakes region. That happened to be the hospital. The town in which I lived didn't have a hospital, in which my parents lived.
Okay. Tell us about your parents.
Well, my mother was a flapper, I would say, a 1920s, a product of the 1920s, but she actually was a phys ed teacher and worked on and off doing that, particularly during World War II, when all the coaches were called away to war. She actually became the coach at the high school. My father had a small business.
Where were your parents born?
My mother was born in Palmyra, New York, and my father was born in the Philippines. His father was a career Army or cavalry officer, actually.
Okay. Aside from their occupations, did they have any particular interests?
I would say that a lot of interests. For the time, my father was very artistic, and he also cooked, but not regularly, but my mother enjoyed playing bridge and traveling.
Great. Do you have any siblings?
2 sisters and 1 brother.
Okay. And what are their occupations?
One sister is a physical therapist. The other sister had a variety of occupations, but ended up in banking.
Any family members in the law?
None.
Okay. You said that you grew up in upstate New York. Describe the town that you grew up in.
It was a very small town. It's actually called Palmyra. People always mistake it for Elmira, but Palmyra has one claim to fame, and that is where Joseph Smith, the founder of the Mormon religion, spent a great deal of his life, and also that was where the golden tablets for the Book of Mormon began, but that's its really only claim to fame. It was the whole town was about 7,000, and the village itself was maybe 3,000, very small.
Okay. Did the village have a high school?
Yes.
Okay. Tell us about the high school.
It was small, and eventually, actually, when I was in high school, 2 towns combined to form a school, and it was just a regular school.
Did you have any part-time work experiences while you were attending high school?
Well, even before. Upstate New York is a rural kind of an area, and I think when I was 12 or 13, I could get a work permit, and I worked in the summer on the farms picking berries and cherries and that sort of thing. And then when I became 16, I worked as a soda jerk in an ice cream store, kind of like Happy Days.
Who were your role models during that period of time?
It was a small school, and all of the teachers were helpful and encouraging, and no one in particular stands out. Although I was thinking this morning that I have to say one of the attributes I got from my father was he was one of the most honest people in the world, and he made me keep track of my babysitting money so that he could declare it on the income tax return as part of my earnings.
What college did you attend?
I went to Syracuse University.
Okay. And how did you select that college?
Full scholarship.
Wow, fantastic. My gosh. What course of study did you pursue there?
Well, when I went there, I thought that I was going to become a dramatic actress. And so I enrolled in the drama department originally. But after about 2 months, I discovered that I had absolutely no experience except my high school plays, and there were people that I was in my classes who had done summer stock and Broadway and so on, and I got scared. That was part of it. And the other thing I thought was that the more I talked to them, the more I realized that you don't go to drama school and then immediately get some part someplace, and that maybe it wasn't too practical. So I tend to be kind of a practical person, so I switched my major to international relations. Perhaps not much more practical.
Interesting. That was probably unique at that time, was it, international relations?
I think it was. This was post-World War II, Cold War politics, and at Syracuse they have something called the Maxwell School of Government Affairs, and that's where I went. Political science.
When did you graduate from Syracuse?
1959.
Okay. And do you recall during that period if there were any people who were particularly influential in terms of your future life?
I had a negative influence. At that time, I guess every student was assigned a faculty member who was their advisor to help them plan their courses and a major and so on. So I went to my advisor, full of all kinds of ideas, and I walked in and sat down, and he looked at me and he says, "Doesn't make any difference what you take. You're going to get married and not go to work anyway, so we won't worry about it," essentially.
That must have been your impetus.
Boy, the rest of my life, I'm going to show that man.
Oh, wow. What did you do after graduation?
I went to New York City and looked long and hard for a job, and finally was employed by IBM, or a subsidiary of IBM. Initially, I think I was in the personnel department, and then moved into administration, and then finally I was trained as a programmer and a systems engineer.
What prompted a move to New York City from upstate New York?
Always loved it. It was as much different as a 7,000 person population town as I could. And my mother had taken me there. And actually, I had sisters that lived there, so I'd spent some time in New York. Thought it was the most exciting place in the world.
Wonderful. And how did you select IBM? How did that
They offered me a job.
Okay. And how long were you there?
I was with IBM, I think about 6 years, although I was married a couple of years out of college, and we moved to the Westchester County, but I still stayed with IBM in a different capacity.
So you moved to New York City after high school?
After college.
After college, excuse me. And then married while you were in New York City?
Right.
I see. And who did you marry?
I married Bill Kelly, and I'm still married to him.
And what does your spouse do? What does Bill do?
He's a writer. And was writing for Prentice Hall Publications in New York when I met him. Actually, we met in our apartment building. He claims that we met in the elevator, and I was actually moving in, and I had a vacuum cleaner in my hand, and now he claims he's never seen me since with a vacuum cleaner in my hand.
What was Bill's attitude about your working in New York, that job, and other career designs that you had?
Always supportive, and always encouraging.
Do you have any children?
I do, too.
And what are their names and dates of birth?
Catherine, who was born June 13th, 1971. Christopher, born July 30th, 1969.
And how did they affect your career choices?
Well, not really much at all, I can say. I had Chris between my second and third years of law school, and Kate before I actually began work in my current law firm. So I never had, they were born before I began my law career, really.
So when did you commence law school?
19, must have been 67.
And where did you attend?
Oregon, University of Oregon Law School.
Now, how did you get to Oregon?
Well, Bill was getting his master's and wanted to get a PhD in English so that he could teach. And he had an interest in a very esoteric period of literature, and there weren't many people in the country that taught it. One of them was at the University of Oregon, so we went out there. And I transferred with IBM and worked there for a year before I began law school.
When did you make the decision to go to law school?
I realized when I was working for IBM that there was a glass ceiling, for one thing, and also that to advance, you really needed to move around a lot with them. In the old days, IBM they used to call it, "I've been moved," and I realized that that wouldn't be compatible with my husband's career, to be moving every couple of years. He wanted to teach English, so, and I certainly liked political science. And so it was just something that kind of evolved, and I thought there's a law school here and I want to go.
Okay. Why did you decide law school?
As I say, I had an interest, but I didn't know much about it. Nobody in the family, and I'd never had any experience with lawyers, but it sounded like a field that I would be interested in, and I probably went in for reasons that bear no relationship to what the career turned out to be.
What did your parents think about that decision at that time, given your life circumstances, marriage, having one child at that point?
No, not until I'd gone to law school.
I see. Okay.
They were supportive, but not really sort of neutral about it.
Okay. And you mentioned that Bill was supportive.
Very. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Were you in any way encouraged or discouraged to pursue a career in law once you actually commenced law school?
Neither, I think. I mean, it was a small law school again. People were very friendly and compatible, although getting in, I have to tell you that in my interview with the dean, as I say, I was married at that time, he asked me during my interview, well, what if you get pregnant and, drop out of law school? And I was taken back by the question, of course, not necessarily offended, but taken and sort of surprised. So I said, well, in this day and age, there are ways to control those things, and that seemed to be satisfactory. Also, I thought I might continue working part-time at IBM while I went to law school, and he looked at me and he said, oh, no. We don't work when we're going to law school. It is a full-time job.
Interesting. So was that true with respect to all students, meaning everyone was there pursuing exclusively the study of law, or did some people have jobs?
I suspect some people there were some older students, and they may have had some part-time jobs. I'm sure no one was going part-time, and no one had, part-time schooling. They probably didn't ask the dean whether they could work part-time.
What, if any, advice were you given with respect to law school?
None. Nobody had any advice.
Do you remember how many women were in your class?
We started out with 5, and 1 left, I believe, after the first year, and so we were left with 4.
Okay. And rumor has it that you were second in your law school class. Is that true?
I was either second or tied for second. I think there were 3 of us at the top, yes.
Okay. So obviously the women were very successful in your class.
The woman that left was top in the first year, and when we graduated there was a woman at the top, and I believe the 3 of us were in the top 4.
Okay. Did you enjoy law school?
Loved it. Absolutely loved it.
What about it did you love as you describe it?
Well, it was so intellectually interesting. Remember, I had worked for 6 years, and so I brought some life experience to it, and it was so exciting to get back into thinking. And I'd had that break from school, and it was really, really wonderful to go back and wrestle with these cases, and very exciting.
How many students were in the entire class, approximately, if you remember?
It was under 100 to start out, and of course, you lose a few along the way.
So with only 4 or 5 women in the class, what were the reactions of your male counterparts?
There didn't seem to be, maybe I was naive. They seemed to treat us fine and without any problem, particularly since we were at the top of the class. They better treat us fine.
Did you participate in any activities in law school other than obviously attending class?
I don't recall. I don't think we had much in the way of extra. I mean, I certainly did everything in the school, but I don't think we had much.
Law review?
I was on law review.
Okay. Did you have any women professors, if you remember?
None. I'm sure we had none.
Did you perceive that the male instructors treated you differently from the male students?
I did not. I think one of the women may have had a problem with actually the dean. I think he was a little harder on her, but other than that, no.
Were there any particularly memorable events from law school?
Well, not really. I mean, it was all a good experience, and I enjoyed the people that I went to school with, and nothing really stands out.
Okay. What was the most important thing you learned in law school?
How to think logically and really delve into problems, think outside the box.
Did you take the bar exam immediately after completing law school?
I didn't, because I was in Oregon, and then my husband was going to find a job teaching someplace, and there were not that many opportunities. So I knew we weren't going to stay in Oregon, although we certainly enjoyed our life there. And he eventually was hired by the University of Connecticut, so we came back to Connecticut. And then I took the bar exam here.
And when was that?
1970 or 71, 70 it must have been, I think.
And what was your experience with respect to the bar exam?
I'm a good test taker. Didn't have much of a problem with it, and I took the tapes at home or whatever what we did at that time, took it and got my license.
When were you sworn in to the bar?
I think it was in 1971, or probably.
Okay.
You're asking an awful lot of dates here.
Did you know any women attorneys before you became a lawyer?
None.
Okay. And do you remember how many women attorneys were sworn in at the time that you were sworn in?
I think we had the swearing in ceremonies locally, and I don't believe there were any others.
Now, you were in a unique position because unlike many law students who, for example, attend the University of Connecticut Law School and then have opportunities in Connecticut, you obviously came from a law school outside of the state. How did you become aware of employment opportunities in Connecticut
I
at that time?
probably looked in the phone book, called up every one of the law firms in New London County, and tried to arrange for interviews.
Okay. And
Although I will say, I knew some of the attorneys because when I first came here, I was hired as the assistant clerk in the Superior Court, temporary assistant clerk, because the assistant clerk was ill. And probably when I was taking the bar exam and my name came up as having passed the bar, probably the clerk of the Superior Court was aware I was there. I think they contacted me.
And so that was your first employment?
First employment, but it was temporary.
Okay. And what did you do in that position?
For the most part, I just sat in court and took notes, and I think we swore in people. I think the clerk swore the witnesses in. Mm-hmm. So I spent a lot of time in court, and therefore had an opportunity to see a lot of the local lawyers.
Did you pursue any employment other than the clerk's position at the time that you accepted the clerk's position?
No, I guess that was probably before I passed the bar. I think I still had to study for the bar.
And
So that was probably, and I was also pregnant, I think, at that time. So I thought I'd better wait until child was born before I started looking for full-time employment.
And how long were you in the clerk's position?
I think it was 6 months or so.
So that actually was a fairly brief tenure.
Brief, yeah.
Okay.
Until the sick person came back. That was why I was there.
Was that a good learning experience to be there in the courtroom?
Very good, because I saw what went on. Once I had done that, I didn't really have any fears about going into the courtroom myself.
That's great. How did you then transition from being in that position, that is a law clerk, to then ultimately going into private practice?
Well, that's when I started seriously looking for a job. My daughter was born, and then after a few months, I started looking for a job.
What type of work were you looking for at that time, if you remember?
Anything. Because this was an area that most of the firms were general practices, so they did a little bit of everything. I certainly didn't have a specialty, and I was willing to do anything that anybody would teach me to do.
And did you interview at more than one firm?
I did. I interviewed at several.
And where did you ultimately accept a position?
At O'Brien Schaffner, where I remain today.
Isn't that great?
An unusual story.
What other firm, do you remember what other firms interested you at the time?
I think I went anywhere where I could get an interview, and Sussman Shapiro was one of the other large firms, and several small firms.
Talk about how your career has evolved in the firm over these many years.
I've done just about everything. I think when I first started out, all the lawyers would do a will, they would do a real estate closing, they would do, all kinds of things. But in my community, I started joining groups and became a speaker, and often they were women's groups. And I found out that through this experience, women would call, and very often their cases were divorce cases. And so I kind of got pulled into that field by the nature of the clients that called and wanted to see me. And so I began to specialize a little bit more in divorce for a period of time.
How is it that you started speaking to groups?
I joined the Women's and Professional Business Women's organization locally, and I think they probably would have different people speak. And then once you speak, somebody else calls you, and some of my partners would have me speak at various places. So.
Is that an activity that the firm encouraged, or is that something that you initiated for whatever reason?
Both. I mean, I think joining some of the women's professional groups, certainly I did myself, but they encouraged me certainly to go out in the community and do whatever I could.
So you began somewhat unintentionally in the area of family law, and did that continue for a number of years, or did your career take another turn?
Well, I was still doing odds and ends, I would say. A will. I had actually a court case, an action to quiet title, kind of mixed in there. I did the divorce work for a while, but became rather dissatisfied with it for a variety of reasons. It's difficult to get paid. It is a lot of time in court and out of court, and it really wasn't the area that I wanted to be in. So eventually I told the law firm that I really didn't think that it was a practice that, given the area that we really ought to continue in, that I'd like to do something different. And at that time, one of our biggest areas of practice was workers' compensation, and in particular, a federal compensation act called the Longshore and Harbor Workers' Compensation Act, which covers harbor workers and in particular the workers at Electric Boat. And we were representing injured workers, and many of them were the victims of asbestos exposure, and we were handling asbestos cases. So at the time, I thought we should be phasing out our domestic relations. I started working in that field, and I've essentially been in that field ever since.
And happy doing that?
Very happy. It is, I do a lot of trials under the Longshore and Harbor Workers' Compensation Act, and a lot of brief writing and arguing, and I enjoy that.
Do you remember how many members of the firm existed at the time you joined them?
I think we were 5.
And how many lawyers do you have in the firm today?
We have about 18, give or take one. There's always somebody coming and going, it seems. And when I say that, one of my associates has just been called back to Army active duty, and will be going to Iraq. So,
what kind of responsibilities there?
for him?
Right.
Well, he will now be in the JAG Corps because he's a relatively new attorney, but he wasn't for his prior experience.
Wow. What responsibilities, if any, did you have to the law firm, other than, of course, handling cases for individuals?
During a period of time, we have an executive committee which does some management, and for a period of time, 5 years or more, I did have that responsibility, which means a lot of personnel handling and so on. But we try to rotate that because it's very difficult to handle that as well as a full-time law practice.
When you joined the firm, were there any women in the firm?
There were none.
Okay. Are there any today, other than you?
Oh yes, we have, I think, 4 others.
Okay.
And actually, I think when I joined the firm, I think they thought I was going to be part-time. But I showed up every day, 5 days a week, all day long, and I guess they finally got used to me.
What were you paid when you started?
I think it was $7,000 a year.
How did that amount of compensation compare to what you had been earning at IBM?
It was less, but of course I was beginning. Yeah, I've forgotten exactly what I made at IBM, but $7,000 was certainly less.
Do you know how that amount of earnings compared to what male law students would have been earning at that time?
I have no idea. I have no idea.
Did you have any way to know how your compensation at the firm compared to other members of the firm?
Eventually I did, and eventually it was comparable, but I don't know about starting out. I suspect it was less than the others when I started, but I don't know that.
Okay. You said that you began full-time, and I assume, or maybe I'm incorrect, that you continued full-time for the rest of your career.
I did.
Tell us a little about what your daily routine is like.
Now or then or when?
Well, let's start back then compared to now.
Well, when you have children, it's difficult, but I tried to appear as if I didn't have children. I came in on time and stayed until 5 o'clock. I worked full time. And for a period of time, I used to go home and cook dinner, put them to bed, and then come back to work. Best working hours I ever had, from say 9 o'clock until midnight. Really enjoyed those hours.
My gosh. And how long did you do that?
For a long time, until they were really out of school, because I tried to be home for that dinner hour for them, and the early evening hours.
What impact did that have on your family life, if anything? I mean, having to juggle your career with caring for the children, working then from 9 p.m. to midnight.
When I look back, I wonder, how did I ever do it? But somehow you do it. I guess a lot of energy and a need for not too much sleep.
How did the children respond to your having a career?
I think children always want their parents with them as much as they can. So I think they were very jealous of the time that I spent away. It may be one reason why my daughter would never consider a career in law, because she said she wanted to have a life outside of her job.
And how did Bill respond to, obviously, these many demands on you with respect to your practice?
Oh, Oh, I'm sure there were times when he wished I didn't have such a commitment to the job, but he really didn't ever complain very much, and as I say, was always very supportive of things I wanted to do and my career.
That's great. Did you have any mentors early on in your career?
My partners have always, my original partners, which are John O'Brien and Matt Schaffner, really have always been supportive and helpful and guides in many things.
And what influence did they have on you?
Well, I think that they taught me skills that are difficult to pick up in the law. For instance, John is a good negotiator, a person that can see two sides who are very much opposed and somehow can bring them toward the middle. I think that I don't have that skill now, but I certainly learned some things from him. And from Matt Schaffner, probably learned there's always a different way to look at a case. Try to think outside the box.
Were there any advantages or disadvantages to being a woman practicing in the law at the time you started to practice?
I think there were certainly some disadvantages. I suspect that people, when I showed up in the courtroom, of course I was the only woman lawyer for a long time. The only other woman practicing in New London County at the time was Judge DuPont, former justice of our appellate court. And so I was unusual, and I think I took some probably ribbing in the court from the lawyers. Some probably went over my head. I didn't realize that they were making fun of me, but never to the point where I felt oppressed or anything by it.
Do you recall how many years passed during which you were one of very few women practicing?
I'm not sure, 5 or 6 or 7 years, and then we started getting a few more in my county. Now, statewide, I'm sure there were many more. Well, I know there were many more.
Okay. And that would have been perhaps in Hartford or New Haven?
Hartford. And I knew that because I joined the Connecticut Bar Association originally, and that was encouraged by my law firm. And I went to one of the annual meetings and walked by a door that said something like, maybe something like women in the legal profession, and I looked in the room and it was full of women, and I thought, well, this might be something of interest to me. And I went in and sat down, and Shirley Beisowitz was the chair of this little committee, which was about women in the law. So I joined that, and through that networking, came to know many of the other women practitioners in the state of Connecticut.
What were your opportunities for advancement at that time? For instance, within the firm itself?
The firm at that time was very democratic and very open, and I was made a partner within 5 years.
Oh, that's remarkable.
5 or 6 years.
So it appears as if you were treated no differently than
I don't believe
your
I was.
male counterparts. What was the attitude of clients toward you when you began to practice?
Well, as I said, I, in the beginning, tended to attract some women who were looking for a women lawyer for divorce matters. We occasionally would have some clients that did not want to be served by me. My partner, Matthew Schaffner, was always adamant about that and would say, you know, if they don't want her, then they don't want us, and they can go elsewhere.
What would you describe as was the attitude of other lawyers with whom you had dealings in a given case, let's say?
Probably initially, if it was an adversarial sort of thing, tried to scare me. One threatened me once. I think I was trying to put a lien on a house trailer for a credit union or something, and he called me up from Hartford and told me that something was wrong with the paperwork, and if I didn't I think we were hauling it away or something. If I didn't do something about it, he was going to put me in jail. And that got my attention very quickly. I didn't go to jail, but, I think there was some effort in that direction. They thought they could intimidate me. And I probably could be intimidated, as any new lawyer can be.
Sure.
For a little while.
How would you describe the attitude of judges toward you?
In New London County, again, a small county, I think they were very accepting of my presence there. But I was in a field where, initially, certainly, domestic relations, where perhaps they thought that was the right place for a woman lawyer to be.
Were there any women judges at that time in New London County?
I don't recall any, no.
Describe the cases that you feel had a significant impact on your life and career.
The cases that had, I don't think any cases have had a big impact on my life. I've been proud of some of the work I've done under the Longshore Act. I've argued several cases successfully at the Second Circuit, and a lot of the cases cite cases that I've been involved in, so it's sort of nice to read a decision citing some of the cases that I've argued. So that's given me a great deal of professional satisfaction.
Tell us a little about one or two of those cases.
One was, it gets involved in the complications of the law, but one in particular at the Second Circuit was a man that part of his problem was learning, besides having a severe physical injury to his arms, also was unable to read and write and had some mental problems. And he was examined by a whole battery of doctors for both sides, and some of them said, he's fine, he can go out and work, and others said he can't. And the decision in particular said that a certain deference had to be given to the treating physician who had treated somebody over a long period of time, and that's been significant.
Any other case in particular where you think of a particularly needy client in the sense of either injuries they had, or is that very commonplace in all of the cases that you have?
I think it's commonplace in a lot of the cases. The ones that get tried, of course, people are usually very severely injured, the ones that are tried, and so there are significant benefits that can be gained for them.
Do you feel that your practice today is markedly different from the practice you had when you began your career?
Well, certainly in the sense that I'm so specialized. I also do a little bit of not-for-profit work, but other than that, I'm pretty... And when I started out, I did just about everything. I did real estate, wills, but the law has grown so complex in all of these areas that I wouldn't dare do a will all by myself anymore, because there are repercussions, tax issues and so on. I wouldn't do a real estate closing because the HUD forms are so complicated. I'd have to take a whole course in that. So in that way, for instance, somebody will ask me about a criminal case, and I'll say, because I'm a lawyer, they think I know. I say, I'm sorry, I don't do that work. I really can't answer you.
Are you happy to be now in a field of specialty?
I'm happy in this field because it continues to be very intellectually challenging. Every day I can get a question or a pleading that makes me go do some research. And so for that reason, I enjoy it.
Looking at your career as it spanned over these years, what impact did it have on your entire family life?
Well, I think we were, with two people working in the family, it's always unusual. Not so much anymore, but certainly in the beginning. And I think that one always regrets not being able to spend more time with the family when they're, but now they're grown and they understand it all and appreciate it. And the other thing I will say is that I notice more and more, if you are busy with the family and busy with a career, it is very difficult to make new friends in a place, or to keep friends, or to keep up with old friends. If there's anything lacking in my life, it's that I don't know my neighbors because I'm never home, and there really aren't, you don't have time to devote to friendships, except, and I will say that the friendships that I have very often have come through my bar association connections, both the American Bar Association and Connecticut Bar Association. So even though people are in California, I still consider them my friends.
And you've committed really an enormous amount of time to your bar organization activities.
I have. I've enjoyed it.
You've talked about the ABA, the Connecticut Bar Association. Have you been a member of any other bar associations?
I've been a member of the Trial Lawyers Association. I've been a member of Employment Lawyers Associations. And of course, the local, New London County, and there are probably some others, but I can't think of them all offhand.
Now, with respect to the Connecticut Bar Association, you were president of the Connecticut Bar Association. When was that, Carolyn?
That was in, I think, 91.
Okay. How did that impact the practice of law?
That is time-consuming, but in many ways it consumed time at night because the meetings are at night. And so that doesn't interfere as much with the practice as one might think. And by that time, my children were out of high school, so I didn't have to worry about getting home to make dinner, and so I could go to the meetings at night. Again, it takes a lot of energy and somebody that doesn't need too much sleep.
And how did the other members of your firm respond to that challenge, that is, of you being president of the Connecticut Bar Association?
Well, they agreed to have me do it, and again, I don't think it interfered with my production during the day because most of it was done at night.
After you completed your tenure as president, you've continued to be active, I know. Can you tell us a little about how you've continued in your involvement with the CBA since you were president?
Well, I've been on, various committees, and I continue to take a very active interest in it. And because I've also been involved with the American Bar Association, I think it's important to know what your own state association is thinking and what its problems are. And I've been continuing a member of, not currently, but of the New England Bar Association, and try to contribute whenever I can.
How did you become involved in the ABA?
As the president of the Connecticut Bar Association, you become a member of the House of Delegates. It's kind of an automatic thing. I had always been a member since the time I, passed the bar, but I'd never gone to any of the meetings. And so when I became a member of the House of Delegates, I got very interested and active in the ABA, and tried to get some committee appointments so that, one of the nice things about, I live in a suburban area and have a limited law practice, and one of the nice things about the ABA is that you do get some sense of legal issues globally when you get involved with, I don't know if sitting in New London County I would become quite so engaged in what's happening at Guantanamo if it had not been for the ABA, for instance.
Have you served on any standing committees of the ABA?
I have. I've been on the membership committee. I've been on strategic communications, which is kind of the public relations committee. I was on the Board of Governors for 3 years and was the chair of the Finance Committee, which is one of the 3 working committees of the Board of Governors.
When was your tenure on the Board of Governors?
That was 1995 or 96 for 3 years.
Okay. And that required an enormous amount of time, didn't it, in terms of attending meetings?
It did. It's 5 meetings, working meetings a year. 2 of them are during the annual and semi-annual, but there are generally 3 other meetings that you go to. And books of materials to read.
And where generally were those meetings held?
Nice places. A lot of cities. Once we went to Puerto Rico, but all American cities, but San Francisco, Chicago.
How much time did you commit to the ABA when you were on the Board of Governors?
Well, certainly 100% of the time for those meetings. And in advance, if you're working on a committee, it's hard to judge, I don't know, but quite a few hours outside of the actual meeting times to read materials, sometimes to prepare a presentation for a subcommittee or something like that.
Did the members of your firm support you in that endeavor, that is the ABA activity?
They did, but not overwhelmingly. I mean, I think in a small law firm you want everyone to pull his or her own weight, and I was out of the office a bit, and I'm not sure that they would necessarily encourage me to do it again.
In addition to having sat on the Board of Governors, you served also as the Connecticut State Delegate. Is that correct?
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And when was that?
That was probably 93 or 94, 95.
Okay. And am I correct in saying you then went directly, after only being the state delegate for approximately a term, you then went on to the board?
I did.
Tell us just briefly, what does the Board of Governors of the ABA actually do?
Well, they are the policy-making board, and so between meetings of the House of Delegates, they conduct a lot of the business. Major issues, of course, come before the House of Delegates, but they do plan some initiatives. I mean, we always have a dues problem in the ABA. Expenses go up, dues have to go up, and how to deal with that. Certainly as a member of the Finance Committee, I was actively engaged in that and overseeing the finances of the organization.
In addition to having been involved in the CBA, the ABA, your local bar, Connecticut Trial Lawyers, have you been involved in any other legal professional organizations, legal services or anything of that nature?
I was on the board of the statewide Connecticut Legal Services for a period of time.
And what did you do in that capacity?
Well, we had board meetings and listened and again made decisions for applying for funding for it, and also being on the board, one becomes a little bit more knowledgeable of how they're handling the great numbers of people who are unable to afford legal representation, which is a very difficult problem.
Were you involved in any community organizations?
I have been, through the time, many. The YWCA, Eugene O'Neill Theater Group on various boards, community. I was on the Bowdoin Wine Granting Committee, which is a committee of the local newspaper which gives out money and grants and so on. So I've been on a lot of community.
And how did you become involved in those various activities?
Well, as you become known in the community, as you speak, and you're in one organization, and you meet people, and they say, oh, well, there's this other organization, and that's really, it's networking.
How did the community activities affect your career, if at all?
Positively. I mean, it's a way of interacting with other disciplines, and certainly if people know your name, they come to you for business.
Reflecting back now, why did you want to be a lawyer?
I thought, well, one reason, I thought I could be a lawyer in a lot of places, which was compatible with being married and having two partners. I thought it would be intellectually challenging. As I say, when I went to law school, I don't think I had an idea of what the practice of law was like at all. Fortunately for me, it turned out to be very satisfying.
So is it fair to say that being a lawyer met all of your expectations?
It has, and it continues to.
What do you feel are the rewards and the advantages of being a lawyer today?
Well, certainly in what I'm doing, I'm able to make a change in people's lives because I'm dealing with injured people, and that is satisfying. That is satisfying.
Have you seen the practice of law change over the years that you've been engaged in practice?
I have. I've mentioned it before, the fact that I think everyone has to become so specialized now that you're no longer kind of the family lawyer that takes care of the real estate closing and the will and the accident when it happens. And it's much less personal now. Unfortunately, people that you've represented for years will see an ad on television saying, call this 800 number if you've been injured or if you, and will not have loyalty to you or the law firm. So, you know, you don't have, I think, the same kind of loyalty. People talk about some loss of civility in the courtroom. Of course, my experience now is in these federal hearings, and so I'm not dealing so much with the local attorneys. So I have not experienced, I think in the smaller communities you still have a pretty civil bar, and certainly in Connecticut.
In the course of your career, have you made any efforts to get other women lawyers more involved?
I have. I think that's one of the very important things that I can do. I have tried to mentor wherever possible lawyers in my own law firm as well as elsewhere. I think it's very important for women to have become involved in the organized bar because of the networking, and I've tried to continue to encourage people to become involved, women to become involved.
How does one accomplish that? How do you, given your positions of influence and real involvement in bar associations, get women to become a part of the leadership of these bar organizations?
Well, I have, when the opportunity arose for someone from New London County to become possibly the president of the Connecticut Bar Association, I spoke to somebody, Debbie Tedford, who had been very active, and said, you know, it's an opportunity and I think you ought to think about it, and I think she did. She did become a very successful president of the Connecticut Bar Association.
If you had to live your life again, would you be a lawyer?
I would, as long as I could live it in the era that I lived in. If I were 20 years old now, I just don't see the same kind of opportunities that I had growing. I mean, I've enjoyed the practice, but I can see problems ahead for the profession. I see assaults from all sides, this lack of loyalty that I spoke about, tampering with the tort system. It is, the profit margin is much smaller than it was. Unfortunately, we do have to be concerned about the bottom line. I think one of the sad things I've noticed in my law firm is that we used to have the luxury of exploring new areas of law and learning about them and saying, oh, well, this is environmental law. Now let's see, maybe we can handle this, maybe we can learn about it. We don't seem to have the luxury to do that anymore. If an environmental law problem comes into the office, walks into the office, we say, sorry, we don't do that, you'll have to go elsewhere. And that's too bad. We're so now focused on our little special areas that we don't seem to have time. Maybe it's different in a big law firm, big, hundreds. You probably still have that luxury, but we don't seem to in the smaller ones.
What advice would you give a woman who was entering the field of law today?
I would certainly tell her to give it her all. Probably would encourage somebody to begin in a city in a large law firm, just to get some exposure to different areas of law, because I think that happens in a large law firm. You can decide later. I always feel as though my areas of practice picked me. I never picked them. Fortunately, it was a good match, at least ultimately a good match. I think it's hard in a small practice to explore a lot of areas of law, and I don't think most people coming out of law school don't know what areas are going to be like, and their only choice is to start out in one area. If that doesn't work out in the boutique law firm, then go to another one.
If you were to begin your law career today, where do you think you'd find yourself? In a city, in a small firm?
I think I would. I start out with. I think I'd like that experience of, I get excited about some of the areas, when I go to the ABA and hear about some of the areas of law that people practice in that are a little bit non-traditional. I enjoy listening to them and saying, well, maybe, you could have done something a little different. Although, as I say, I'm happy with my area.
Any particular field of law that would attract you today?
I don't know. I do like court work, some court work, but I do like appellate maybe. I enjoy writing briefs, and I like appellate work, the intellectual side of it.
Now that would be very different from the court work that you do.
But I do a lot of appellate work in that's how I get up to the second. Interestingly, we have one appeals to an appeal board, and then it's right to the Second Circuit. So I have a fair amount of appeal work on a lot of little issues in this law.
Okay, we're taking a break here. Carolyn, we're back after a brief break, and I thought I'd go back to the issue of people who have had an impact on your life in the career of law.
Well, I really should mention Marilyn Seichter, who, as you know, was the first woman president of the Connecticut Bar Association. And Marilyn was very interesting in that she understood politics, both the politics of bar associations and the politics of government. And I learned quite a bit from Marilyn, and Marilyn explained how you go about maneuvering your way through the bar association. And she taught me something else, because we would often go to meetings together. She kind of taught me how it was okay to be good to yourself. I think the first time I ever went to a spa, Marilyn encouraged me to go to a spa. Who would have time to go for a spa? She said, no, you got to take care of yourself. So those were some of the things that she taught me. And also, when you take care of yourself, you learn to relax, and that's a good thing too, when we're so busy day in and day out.
Were there any other particularly influential people in your life and career?
Well, I mentioned when I went to my first Bar Association meeting that Shirley Beisowitz was the leader of that group. And Shirley was always kind of a mentor, particularly, again, in Bar Association. She was a lawyer and a teacher, I think, at UConn. But she was one of the first women members of the Board of Governors. And she once refused to go to a meeting, I believe it was at perhaps the Quinnipiac Club, because that was a male-only club. And she said, you hold the meeting here, I'm not going to attend the meeting. And there was some grumbling, and I think eventually they either changed the site of the meeting. And fortunately, those clubs, in my lifetime, have, of course, opened to all genders and races.
Now, you mentioned Marilyn Seichter as the first woman president of the Connecticut Bar Association. If I'm not mistaken, you were the second.
I was the second
woman. How did that happen?
Well, I had decided, because of the way we rotate the presidency around the state of Connecticut, being very democratic, I'm in the category of all other counties, which are the outside counties. And the year after Marilyn was president, it was time for all others, so I thought I would run. One of the male leaders of the Bar Association said that he thought it would be better if I waited for 3 years, because after all, we had just had a woman president, at which point Marilyn and I probably said in unison, but you've had 80 or 90 years of male presidents, so I don't think 2 in a row would be a problem. So that's when I decided to run.
Was it a contested election in the nomination process, if you know?
It may, I don't know.
What work had you done in the Connecticut Bar Association that led up to the decision to run for president?
I had held several offices, and I think I was treasurer for a few years, quite a few years, maybe even 3 or 4. And as a matter of fact, one of the things that Marilyn and I agreed upon when we became presidents was that people can't make a profession out of being the treasurer of the Connecticut Bar Association, and really it ought to rotate through members of the bar so that everybody has an opportunity to serve in a leadership role.
Has technology changed the legal profession?
Well, my relationship with technology has certainly changed through the years, and of course it's changed the legal profession, but that brings to mind the fact that when I was in high school, decided that whatever I did in life, I didn't want to be a secretary. So the way I was going to prevent myself from being a secretary was I didn't take typing. And I thought, I can never take a job as a secretary, so I won't take typing. Well, that worked for a while, but then when the computers were introduced into our lives, that is a little bit of a drawback not to have typing. But has technology changed? Of course, when I began, we had carbon paper, and then we got copying machines, and I'm very proud to say that I have a case management system on the computer. I can do email. I still don't type my own letters, never did take typing, and do research on the computer these days. Now, there are other people of my generation who really think they're too old to learn, but of course they should. How has it changed things? Our clients want quicker turnaround because they can get to us quicker with faxes and emails. Incidentally, I don't encourage email with my clients. A few of them have discovered that I have it, but I think you give a quick answer, and sometimes it isn't a thoughtful answer when you're responding by email. So that's one of the drawbacks of technology, is everybody wants everything sooner. But all in all, I think we have better tools, and it is a more efficiently run practice these days.
What, if anything, have women added to the legal profession and/or the legal system?
I think they changed the dialogue. I think they, in that we're certainly aware in the profession of the issues of discrimination, and the more women that are in the profession, the more we can make people aware of the issues of gender discrimination. My first year on the Board of Governors of the American Bar Association was the first year in which there they had placed people on that board there were seats for women and minorities. And so for the first time in many years, a good third of that board were either women or minorities, and it definitely changed the dialogue. It made that board explore things in a different way, and I think that's what women have added to this profession and many other professions.
When you first served as the state delegate to the ABA, you served, of course, in that capacity on the nominating committee of the ABA. How many women were on the nominating committee at that time?
I don't recall specifically, but I think only a handful, maybe 5 or 6.
And to the best of your knowledge, has that changed?
That
over
has
time?
increased over the years. That has increased. That's one of the areas that there has been an increase, but there are other areas of leadership in that organization in which the women have not improved their situation.
Now, I know you're far too humble, but I'd like you to tell us what accomplishments in your life you're most proud of.
Well, any woman with children always says my children, because they truly are the joy of my life. I'm very proud of people they have turned out to be, and glad they turned out that way in spite of the fact their mother was absent a lot of the time. Probably I'm proud of the leadership roles that I've held in the Bar Association and contributed in whatever way I could, small ways. There's nothing big and dramatic out there. It's we inch our way along and try to make improvements. But as long as we always think that way, and I try to always think that way, of making it just a little bit better than it was before, maybe that's my nature. I don't have to make a big splash of anything. Just try to make it a little bit better, and then the next person that comes along makes it a little bit better too.
Well, I want to thank you. It's been a real pleasure interviewing you. As well as I know you, I learned a lot of new things today. And I want to thank you on behalf of the bar and the profession, because you have made great accomplishments, and not only in your practice, but also in the organized bar, both as president, state delegate, active in the New England Bar Association, Board of Governors, ABA. You've done a spectacular job, and we are most grateful. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.